Welcome back to the Amplified Action Podcast. I'm Jake. Andre's joining me as always, and today we are going to be talking about how to smash your procrastination. Uh, how do we get rid of procrastination? Procrastination, I mean, it's such a killer of productivity. It's something that we all run into. So we have three kind of like practical steps you can take to get rid of your procrastination and to ultimately be more productive. So procrastination, although it's the enemy of progress, it's also often a necessary ingredient, and it's something that we just can't ignore. So we're gonna break it down today. Andre, do you have any thoughts?
I like viewing procrastination as a clue that I need to maybe shift a little bit, not to go away from whatever it is I'm doing, but maybe slow down and reflect just a little bit. But there are different ways that you can handle procrastination, and it can be different levels of effectiveness in how you deal with it. But I like viewing procrastination as a clue that something might need to change. So I'll like run it through like my like checklist of what actually makes it procrastination or not. Um, what makes the procrastination positive or negative, um, as like a part of like what happens when I find myself procrastinating. So I think that you could use it like it's just a clue. So just treat it as a clue.
And that is perfect segue into step number one, which is understand the cause of procrastination. And that's what it is. Like procrastination, it's a signal. And that's why don't view it as a negative thing. It's a signal that you need to respond something, you need to change something. And I so one of like my go-to systems for like myself is structured journaling. So I have templates that are essentially like a series of questions for different scenarios. And I actually have one for procrastination. So I literally have it's in Notion, and I can go add a it's a template in Notion. I can go add a new one, and it automatically pops up and it seeds with I have four questions. These are the ones that I go to, and I'm always iterating on these templates. But when I'm procrastinating, I recognize, okay, I'm procrastinating, and then I need to figure out why. So the four questions I ask myself is this not a high priority? So sometimes I procrastinate because it's like it just doesn't feel worth it, and I'm annoyed, and I'm like, I don't want to do this thing because it's not a high priority. Is the goal unclear? So like I don't understand what the outcome of what I'm doing, because if I know that like I do this thing and it's going to have this impact, it's usually it's you don't procrastinate them because you know exactly what you're doing. So it could be a clarity thing. And the second one that relates to clarity is the definition of done unclear. So like I don't know where it sort of begins and ends, and then that makes me not want to do it because I'm like I don't even know where I'm going to stop. And then the last one, which I think is something I this is my most recent addition to it. Do I feel like this is somebody else's responsibility? Because I find myself procrastinating on things where I'm like, they should have just done their job. Like, why do I have to do this? Like, I this isn't my job to do it or something. Um, and I found myself that was like a common reason when I was journaling about this why I was procrastinating, because it was like I was a little bit resentful that it was like I felt like I was doing something that was somebody else's job. So just yeah, those are the four questions I run through for myself to figure out why I'm procrastinating, and then usually that gives me the answer on how to counteract it. Either I can delegate it, I can ask somebody else to do it, I can clarify it, I can deprioritize it. Like it just it helps you find the path.
The, First of all, those are awesome questions that you've built a system to make yourself ask these questions of yourself. That's super valuable. I like it. Um, I don't have anything that formal, but it is. Maybe I should put this on my little post-it on my computer. Really good. Um, for myself, I find that in order to avoid procrastination, have to have a smaller priority list. So dropping items off of my high priority list and putting it in my like I have a system where I have tier one tasks that are the real needle movers. Like I don't put more than two things per day in the real needle mover category. That's tier one. Then I have tier two, which is like kind of like similar to tier one, but I give myself permission to drop those off because I've already hit one or two. And then tier three is all of the other crap that makes it onto the to do list that maybe shouldn't be, which falls into the should this be someone else's responsibility? And is this an everlasting task that has some result that's not known? And like I try to like if I categorize into those three tiers, I find that my propensity to procrastinate just goes down. It's not as likely to happen. I'm not gonna get stuck in like the procrastination loop, right? So like having like a way to reflect on these things that's a part of like a system that you have for yourself is super important. For me, it's not formal, but every week I kind of like scroll through. I use TickTick as a productivity app. I scroll through my list of things that I've done for the week, and I'm like, how many of these things really needed to, can I shift these in the tier list of things that I'm trying to do? So that's something that I do for myself, and it's not as formal, but there's a lot of benefits to having a clear system like that, like Jake has.
Yeah, and I have like formal ones, like formal reviews that I do weekly, and then I have like the ad hoc ones, like the procrastination stuff that I just like I can pull up in the moment. I should package those up or something because I have a. It's like the main system I use for intaking when I read a book or a podcast or something, and they're like, there's all these tips. I'm like, here's how you do this thing, and here's how to avoid procrastination. I package it up into a structured journaling template and then just label it with the time that I need to use it. And that's like my mental process flow. Like Jake is procrastinating. Jake needs to do these four things to stop procrastinating. And I do that for like everything. Like I have one if I have bad sleep, if I'm bad mood, like all these things. And like you can go overkill with this stuff too. And like I obviously like I don't always do this. I don't always follow my own systems, but I try to. And that kind of leads into point number two, which is um, maintain consistency. So when we're talking about procrastination, I think the biggest risk of procrastination is it throws us off, right? Like we break the cycle, we break the chain, we don't keep the momentum going because consistency turns into a habit. You show up even if it's not 100%. And I think there's a few practical things we can break down here, but I'm going to share my number one tip that has helped me the most, and you'll all roll your eyes. It's cold showers or cold plunges, and I will tell you why this works. This is why it works. If you are consistent with a cold shower in the morning, if that is your number one task, what the cold exposure does is it boosts your dopamine, and you can do anything after you get out of a cold shower or a cold plunge. I swear anything, at least for me. So it's always my number one activity. I don't do it every day, but I did for quite a while. It's my number one activity because I can feel like complete crap, and then after 2 minutes in cold water, you become you are alive again, and you can then show up even if it's not at 100%. Even if it's just 50%, it's like the booster that always works for me. So that's how I maintain consistency. If I maintain consistency with that one thing, except don't do it when you're sick. I learned that lesson too. Like don't you can go too far with this stuff too because it can wear on you quickly. So like if you're sick, don't hop in the cold plunge. It can make it worse. Um, but yeah, that's like my system for that. It's like I have to freeze my ass off for just 2 minutes. The next thing I can show up for.
Yeah, I've done that a couple of times. It I don't live in a cold place anymore. So like I'm in North Carolina. I don't get to just jump in freezing cold water that's just freezing cold because it's freezing cold outside. So I stopped upkeeping it. But yeah, there's a lot to it. It's just like a huge boost, and conquering your day with those 2 minutes, starting with those 2 minutes, just makes everything else it just like chemically puts you in an advantaged position. Like it changes your mindset. The other thing that consistency helps with, and a lot of the reason why people procrastinate is when people procrastinate, a lot of the times you talked about like, you know, is the input to output like kind of clear? Like, is there a link between what I'm doing and what my result is? And a lot of the times we actually do have a clear link, but what we have is uncertainty on when the result will happen. So having consistency and understanding that it's going to take potentially hundreds or thousands until one thing actually like hits, right? And that's maintaining consistency allows for those uneven probabilities to play out. You get volume in, and if you're not consistent, you're never going to get to that known result with an uncertain chance of having it happen. Like that's a big part of how risk to reward plays out, and it's something that I learned a lot in poker. There's an expected value formula that you could apply freaking everywhere. It's like probability of outcome happening times percentage chance. And if you do it enough times, it's going to happen. And that plays out all kinds of different things, especially when you have uh, complex systems. And a lot of life is maximizing your risk to reward. And a lot of the best bets are the ones that only happen, they only play out after hundreds or thousands or more of repetitions. And it's just because your chance of that really big event happening is like 0.1%. But if that 0.1% happens, it can be a 5,000 fold change. So it's like finding these unequal bets and then just hammering away at it consistently is a huge part of making something big happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna go down a bit of a rabbit hole just because you sparked so many good thoughts there. It should hopefully be relevant. We'll see where it goes. But it reminded me, so like I'm a systems nerd. I go by Systems Jake. I love systems and systems thinking, but I have a gripe with people who talk about systems because I think they think about them very mechanically. Like A causes B, B causes C, C causes D, which is true, but they miss the probability factor that you're talking about. And they miss the idea of a black swan event, meaning if there's a 0.01% chance of something happening, but you repeat something long enough so that probability becomes true because that's how probabilities work, like it will happen in theory. Um, that can change everything. So it's not always step A produces step B produces step C. It's step A leads to an increase in probabilities of step B becoming true, which then creates this, huge result or something. And I love to look at that way. And it's, you're taking some risk, like you got to balance that risk reward. Like, of course, you have to know that it is actually possible and the probabilities in your favor. But it's really combining those two mindsets is when I think you unlock everything.
If you give it enough repetitions and like having the unequal bet is where your outcome can be way more than your input. Like even if it takes 1,000 times, you could end up with a huge change that's worth way more than the 1,000 repetitions ever would have been.
The other like practical tip that I keep in my mind is from James Clear, who obviously is extremely influential when it comes to building habits, and he has the 2 minute rule. So I think the way, if I remember correctly, the 2 minute rule is like when you're setting up a new habit, make it a 2 minute ritual so that it's so low effort that you go through the motions and you form the habits. Like you go through the repetition and you form the habits. I also look at it as just do the thing for 2 minutes. If you're supposed to exercise, but you really don't want to, just do it for 2 minutes. Just start for 2 minutes. That's all it really takes. Like if you start for 2 minutes, you put your gym clothes on, you lace up the shoes, whatever it is, you go there, you sit down, you start warming up, you're going to continue on. Um, so I think that's how you maintain consistency is you just show up regardless. Even if it's you show up and you fail, the success is in showing up. It's not in completing the entire process.
Yeah, right now I'm rebuilding my lifting routine. I ended up like taking a soft break from it where I would only lift maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks because I was like getting beaten up constantly in jujitsu, and I just didn't want. I didn't. I was. I had to choose. Like, well, how am I going to use my time? And due to schedule changes, I can't really do the jujitsu training as much anymore. So I'm rebuilding my lifting routine, and the way I'm doing that is not by going back to my old routine, which used to be really hard, which would be like an hour of lifting, and it's just really beats you up. I show up, I do 2 exercises, 5 sets of 8 to 12, and then I leave. That's all I'm asking of myself. If I feel like doing more, I will do more. Now, I haven't done more except one time in the past 15 or 20, and that's okay because those 2 exercise the 2 exercises I chose, it hits most of what I need, and I'll 80/20 it and I'll set the habit. And like I find myself wanting to go do it. Whereas if I was just like beating myself up doing the whole hour, I don't think I would have gone as many times.
Yep. Yep, you gotta pace yourself. It's a long-term game we're playing here. Don't burn yourself out, don't go too hard. 2-minute rule, I mean, and you can, that's a philosophical concept. It could be 15 minutes, it could be 20 minutes. It's relative to whatever you're actually working on. Um, Consistency is the goal. It's not. It's a long term game. You just want to be consistent, and that's how you beat procrastination. And this is going to lead us into the third point, which is redefine the narrative. So you have to prove to yourself through action and consistency that you are not the type of person who procrastinates. You are the type of person who shows up and at least tries every single time. And when you become that person, anything is possible. And I always say this, and this is one of the core mindsets that I try to keep in my head is that time does not really exist as we see it. Like we're at point A and you want to get to point B. And the second you make the decision to be consistent, you are already at point B. Time just has to catch up to it. It doesn't matter. Like you are already that person. And this is when like, uh the the woo woo people get into all these fun terms like quantum leaping and manifestation and things like that. Like I don't care what you call it. Time is so much more complex than we understand it. Like we experience time how we experience it, but like time is a concept that is so much deeper than our human perception is of it. And all it really takes is it's just that one decision. And if you make that decision and you are consistent, you just carry it through, it's already there. You're already that person. Just now you just get to enjoy the process of seeing time play out. And that's
Yeah,
fun. That's a fun
the
process.
the actions will catch up to your decision. Ultimately, that you can definitely have the viewpoint of decision, you've changed, and then everything else is just justifying what's already happened, which was the decision, right? So that, yeah, I like that. I like that viewpoint. It helps us to not get discouraged when we're trying to make the change to have a more positive relationship with procrastination and a more positive relationship with productivity and just a more positive relationship with yourself. So control your narrative a little bit, make the decision to change, and then just let it back itself up. Like that's all it really takes. So create positive loops.
And that's why you start small because you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And then, your subconscious is always listening to you. It's like, oh, here goes Jake again trying to form this habit or do this thing. And he didn't do it again. I guess he's just not very good at that thing. Like that's the narrative going on in your unconscious is judging you. You want to prove it right. Like, look at that. He showed up even on a hard day. It seems like that person really has their stuff together and they're really changing their life. That's the narrative you want. And once you install that operating system in your brain, like the graph goes up immediately in all areas of life.
Yeah. So it's that great point. So I think that was most of it. So let's wrap it up here. So we've got understanding the cause, and like when we understand the cause, we can make adjustments and have things drop off or get reframed. So that can really help us with the procrastination bit. Maintain consistency, because a lot of the things that we're procrastinating on have percentage probabilities, and we just need to keep doing it in order to have things play out. That's really important, and people sleep on this. So really take a note of this. Think about it. Think about it in terms of probabilities. I promise it's going to help make the things that are unequal possibilities much more likely to play out. So do that. And then the 2 minute rule. I love the 2 minute rule. I've always thought about things in terms of it, uh, Not in terms of the 2 minutes, but in terms of doing the minimum effective dose that sets the habit. That's really what it is. Do that. It seems like, oh, it's just a waste of time if I do it for 1 or 2 minutes. It's not. Like, setting the habit is more valuable than getting a an individually greater event to happen. So that's important. Um, Manage your self talk. Create a narrative that makes sense to get to where you want to go. Make the decision to be that person. Justify it afterwards. Set your habits, and that's how you launch.
Absolutely. Great wrap up. I authentically 100% believe that if you follow everything we said in this podcast, things will change for the better. This is one of the clearest like set of tips I think we've given out that I'm like 100% confidence in. I have 100% confidence in. So go for it. Like don't treat these things lightly. This is a positive loop. These three things they all feed into each other, and it just keeps making things go up. So let's go out there, do good things, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, for sure. Hit the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. We appreciate it. So yeah, go do those things, and we will see you in the next episode.